and welcome to another episode of Mike and Dave's Hi-Fi Riff. I'm Mike Evans.
And I'm David Price.
And David, on this week's episode of Riff, what are we going to talk about?
It's the Audiolab 9000A, Mike.
Which is a streaming integrated amplifier.
Wrong.
Doesn't stream.
Yeah, but I'm very glad you brought that up.
Anyone would have thought that was scripted.
Yeah, the fact that it doesn't stream is a very deliberate thing.
Yes.
Audiolab have a matching 9000N network audio streamer coming out for your perusal at some point.
All your streaming needs.
All your streaming needs. But the idea is that this is a kind of reinvention of the original 8000A.
Yes.
Kind of for the modern world, as it were, with all the gadgets, all the doodads of normal that a normal integrated would have back in the 80s, but no streaming now, obviously.
Sure, so, but it has a DAC in it, doesn't it?
It does,
yes. Yeah. So let's just talk a little bit about the 8000A, because it's a product which I know very well.
Yeah.
So it was actually pitched against some really stiff competition at the time, because it was pretty much close to the original NameNate price point,
yeah.
Exposure 10 price point,
yeah.
Cambridge Audio.
So it was... So you could almost...
P60, was it? Something like that?
A60 kind of thing.
Yeah.
Miss TMA3.
TMA3.
Cyrus 2.
Yes.
MVA AP30. That kind of thing.
Really stiff competition, but the 8000A sold in bucket loads.
It did.
It was really, really successful. And it's interesting because I remember actually, ironically, one of its USPs was it had tone controls, and balance control.
Yeah.
And lots of the amps we just mentioned didn't. They were sort of straight through signal path and purist. But actually, a lot of people bought it because they liked the tone controls.
Yeah.
And it was a pretty good sounding amp. I'm not sure it was best in that class.
I don't think it was.
But it was, but it was a decent sounding amp.
Yeah, so, I mean, you could almost say it was a kind of 1980s version of the A&R A60, couldn't you?
Yes.
So it was roughly the same price point, and like the original A&R A60, it had tone controls.
Yeah.
It didn't have filters or that kind of stuff, but those had kind of gone by the 80s. But you could say the Audiolab was a sort of Arcam A&R, because it's pre-Arcam. It was A&R A60 in a kind of 1980s suit with shoulder pads and, kind of rolled up sleeves, basically. It was like that, wasn't it? With
yes.
White shoes.
Yes.
And an XR3i.
Yes.
But it was, as you say, all the other amps of that time that people were buying, like us, they'd moved away from tone controls and they got into minimalism, and less is more, hadn't they?
Yeah.
In your case, with your NameNate, an awful lot less is...
An awful lot. Although my NameNate had the world's weirdest balance control.
It did.
Which actually just turned down one speaker, which is kind of bizarre.
No expense spared.
No, not at all. Not a penny spent. Not a penny spent, in fact. But this is a different beast, because this has really sort of taken it into the sort of 21st century, and we've just been listening to it and playing sort of fairly eclectic tunes.
Yep.
So interesting. So we listened to it driving your Yamaha NS1000s.
We did.
And my question to you before we fired it up was, is it going to be all right doing this?
Yeah.
And it was.
It was.
It had no problem. And in fact, I think the amplifier stage on this, pre-power amp, obviously integrated, is great.
Yeah.
Sounds really good.
Yeah.
Sounds really brilliant.
Yeah, I mean, it's interesting, firstly, that they've stuck with Class AB.
Yeah.
So a lot of people these days are now going to Class D, and it's almost like when a new amp comes out and it's not Class D, it's almost like a political decision, It's kind of like we're sticking with rear-wheel drive, even though everyone else has gone front-wheel drive.
Sure.
So that's an interesting thing, and it offers a claimed 100 watts per channel RMS into 8 ohms,
yes,
which is enough for most people.
Well, enough for your NS1000s.
Yeah. So it drove the NS1000s without any stress or strain, and we've heard amplifiers are costing a lot more than the £2,000 that the 9000A costs.
Yes.
Excuse me. Struggle with those speakers.
We really have.
So it's definitely no no issues with power output. It's designed to give a really solid thump of
and it does.
of power out. Yeah,
it does. It's
yeah.
pretty cool.
Yeah.
So listening to it through the digital input and with a kind of variety of sources. In fact, we used a very interesting. Nobody's ever done this. We
Yes.
used your Technics CD player, your previous top of the range CD player from 1989.
Yes, the SLP 999. I'm sure thousands of viewers have got one of those.
Yeah, and Audiolab 9000.
Yes.
and your Yamaha speakers.
Well, I'm sure
That classic combination.
I'm sure when Audiolab were developing the 9000A, they used equipment, including the ones that we've just mentioned,
Yes.
to check that it worked okay.
Yeah.
Because everyone uses a 1989 CD player and 1978 speakers.
So we used the digital out from your Technics.
Yeah.
Into the Audiolab.
Yeah.
And again, it was pretty good.
It was
pretty good.
It was pretty good. Yeah.
Look, dare I say, I think the DAC is probably the weakest link in the amp in the whole of the setup. I think you could probably do better DAC wise at the price point. But I think it's pretty tidy, isn't it?
Yeah, well, I think we kicked off, didn't we, with the internal DAC?
Yes.
Fed from my CD player and my Technics CD player.
Yes.
Which will be appearing on a Hi-Fi Riff near you.
It will
very soon.
Yeah.
And we thought, yeah, that sounds great. We're happy with that. That's perfectly respectable for a £2,000 amp. But then we went through the line-ins, didn't we?
Yes, yeah.
And
it was a different kettle of fish, wasn't it?
it was better, wasn't it?
It was, yeah, it was. I'm afraid the DAC in the Technics was better. But that said, look, that's totally forgivable. This is a really good one-stop shop.
Yeah.
You've got one box and it pretty much does everything. And as you say, coupled with the streamer or streamer of your choice, then away you go.
Yeah.
You're up and running, aren't you?
Absolutely, and I would say that most integrateds I've heard at that price, and indeed substantially more expensive, basically they sound better when fed through a good source through their analog ins than they do through their bundled DACs.
Yes. Yeah.
Obviously, it varies with the amp, but the Audiolab is not unique in sounding even better through RCA line-ins than it did through its internal DAC.
Yes,
and
sure.
of course, it depends what you're putting through it as well. doesn't it?
Absolutely. Yeah.
So,
absolutely.
yeah.
And speaking of which, Phono Stage.
Yeah, it's got a moving magnet
magnet.
Phono Stage. Audiolab say they've spent a lot of time on this. It's worth noting, I mean, one of the attractions of the original 8008 was the Phono Stage. It had a very good Phono Stage. And one of the first things I did when I became a reviewer for Hi-Fi World in the mid-90s, or 93 or whenever it was, I phoned up Phil Swift from Audiolab, said, "Hello Phil, can I have your latest 8008 to review?" And I phoned up Doug Graham from Name and said, "Hello Doug, can I have your latest Name Nate 3 to review?" And Doug initially said, "By the way, no," but that's just Doug. But I ended up with the latest Nate 3 and the latest Audiolab. And I thought the Audiolab was going to be crucified by the Nate 3. And it wasn't.
Sure.
Actually,
sure.
it was kind of almost better in some ways. Than the Nate 3 was a great amp. I don't know if you ever heard that.
No,
but, yeah,
I didn't.
So much better than that rubbishy old Nate 1 that you've got.
Which is a hi-fi classic.
It's got more than 3 watts per channel for a start.
It's got 7. It's got 7 watts per channel, my name, Nate, I'll have you know.
Its balance control works on both channels as well.
I'll give you that.
So, so the Nate 3, I think, was a great integrated amp. But still, the Audiolab wasn't completely embarrassed by it. And one of the really clever things about it was the Phono Stage. So they always had very good Phono Stages in the 8000A. And at that time, they were switchable moving magnet and moving coil.
Yeah.
Audiolab have decided, for their own reasons, probably sensible commercial reasons, just to do a moving magnet this time, because most people buying a $2,000 integrated with a DAC inside probably won't be running a moving coil cartridge in their turntable. You could say the 9000A is just as per the 8000 of 1982 a jack of all trades, isn't it?
It is. Yeah, yeah. I think it's really a very, very decent, very capable amplifier.
Yeah.
Good price point as well for what you get for the money.
Yeah.
Because I'm trying to think of a sort of a competitor around about the same price, and I'm struggling a little bit to think of something sort of naturally up against it. To do the AB dem with. The exposure is dearer, particularly if you have the DAC module in it.
Yeah, the 3510 is dearer. It's substantially about £1,000 more.
Yeah, yeah.
But there is a one model lower exposure that's kind of closer to that.
Sure.
But it doesn't have all the kind of bells and whistles of the 9000A.
Yes.
So it's not quite aimed at the same market.
No,
you could say.
And the Mission Classic. Integrated as well.
Yeah, classic amp.
Classic amp is doesn't have a DAC, so but that's a nice sounding amp.
Yep.
That's pretty good. That's a similar price point.
Yep.
But again, you'd have to have an external DAC with that. I think is it the i9 which has the built-in DAC and all the whistles and the bells, but that's another £1,000 more.
Yeah.
That's in competition with the exposure.
Yeah.
So I'm struggling to think of sort of good competition at the price point. So again, I think they've got that right. I really do.
Yeah, absolutely, and it really does. Just like the old days of the 8000, it was always the do everything amp that does everything without complaint, has plenty of power.
Yes.
And may not be absolutely the best, through analog sources maybe, or through moving coil, moving magnet, or whatever. It was always a kind of jack of all trades and master of some, rather than some other amps which are more focused in a particular direction.
Sure.
And I think that they've retained that very much with the 9000. But it's got 4 SP diff digital inputs. It's got 3 line inputs. It's got balanced XLR in, Phono, aptX and LDAC, Bluetooth. And a streamer. No, that's
no. Doesn't have a streamer.
Doesn't
have a streamer.
Yeah.
But also, I think there's a USB-B where you can plug your phone in, isn't there? So if you wanted to do that, so actually, what you could do is you could have your phone as the source, use the DAC within the Audiolab and the pre-power, and then bolt on a pair of speakers for sort of say £1,000, and actually you'd have a really decent system for £3,000.
Yeah.
We tried it with the Mission 700s, didn't we?
We did. Yeah.
The new Mission 700s, which is probably far more in keeping than your NS 1000s, far more real world, I guess. And it was fine. It drove them no problem at all.
It was it was quite a good combination actually.
Yes.
Because the 700s are, as we'll show in our another riff that we're doing.
Yeah.
They're kind of quite lively and sort of they're sort of game for a laugh, aren't they?
They are. They're like a sort of puppy biting at your ankles.
And the Audiolab has a more not sedate but sort of more balanced presentation, doesn't it?
Yeah.
It's kind of grown up and refined.
Yeah.
Rather than a little terrier biting at your ankles.
There was a nice synergy between the two.
Yeah.
There really was.
Yeah.
Good dynamics.
Yeah.
Good thumping bass.
Yeah.
Pretty a little bit bright for my taste.
I think that was largely the emissions, though, wasn't
it?
Yes,
without a doubt. That's definitely not the Audiolab. As you say, the Audiolab sort of brings them back to earth and puts the lead on them a little bit.
It's a smooth and polished sound with lots of detail, very good stereo, I thought, good sound stage.
Yeah, really good, really good.
And, generally musical and tight, and it kind of kept our attention. And
it did. We were listening to our usual sort of eclectic collection of weird stuff. One of our Submarines by Thomas Dolby we listened to on that, and that sounded really good actually.
Great song, and that really worked for that.
Yeah, really nicely recorded too. So that was cool.
We also did the obligatory 80s-tastic Smooth Operator by Sade.
We did actually. Actually, that was really good.
Yeah,
that was really, really good. Especially the kind of instrumental bits.
Yeah.
There was that. I thought that worked an absolute treat.
Yeah, and it bounced along. Not quite with puppy dog enthusiasm, but in a very controlled and enjoyable way, and had power and dynamic driving ability that wasn't compromised. I'd say, unlike.
Yeah.
Some amplifiers of that price.
Well, that's it, isn't it? I think you've absolutely nailed it there. I think if I spent £2,000 on this amplifier, I would not be at all disappointed.
Yes.
I think that was a really, really fair price for a really good product.
Yeah.
And I think they've absolutely nailed it. if you want to, I think if you want to significantly improve on it, you've got to spend another 1,000. I really think that from what I've heard.
Yeah,
so
I mean,
far,
I think both of us would agree that we'd go as an upgrade on that to something like a 3510 exposure, which is actually more coloured and fruitier in the bass, isn't it?
Yes.
But it kind of bounces along. It's very kind of emotional. It's a more kind of pulls the heartstrings kind of presentation.
Yes.
But that's a lot more money. And the fact that the Audiolab does very well for substantially less and offers more functionality and connectivity makes a good case for it. I think.
I probably also, if I did buy the exposure, I probably wouldn't pay for the onboard DAC.
No,
I'd probably use an external DAC.
For
rich or for poor, but you don't have a choice with this Audiolab.
No,
it's there, and whether you like it or not.
Yeah.
But I can't help but think that if anything did niggle me after my purchase, it would be my next upgrade will be the DAC.
Yeah.
And you'd want to go and buy a Chord Qtist or something to plug into it.
Yeah. But all of those considerations, viewers, were completely swept away when Mike discovered you could get VU meters out of it.
Yes, now that's it. So it's got this really sweet little display on the left-hand side, and which is configurable, and you can have proper old-fashioned VU meters on it.
Yes.
So that's it. I mean, honest to goodness, what is not to absolutely love about that? Because that is just so cool.
All Mike's critical faculties just went as he saw
twin VUs,
like a kind of 8-year-old standing outside, scratching the window at Lasky's in 1978
and
watching
also,
the VU meters.
I've got to say, and this is a little bit of a sort of a heads up for a future riff, pairing it with your Technics, that also has VU meters. So he had both bits of kit with VU meters.
Yes.
VU meters on a CD player. I mean, what on earth's going on there? I mean, just fantastic.
It was a VU meter-tastic day.
It really was. It really was. Look, we'll post that picture you took on our Instagram account.
Yes.
Because that's it is a VU-tastic shot with both of them.
Never mind what it sounds like. Just look at the flashing lights.
100%. Yeah.
But one thing, a point of order, I would like to complain about. So they call them VU meters, but they're power meters.
They are power meters because if volume's down, then
absolutely. So a VU meter is basically a line input level, as it were.
Yes.
So it tells you the relative volume units of the line input. But these are linked to the amount of power coming in.
Yeah.
So they're basically power meters.
Yes.
So,
yes.
That's but that's.
I didn't care really. It was just so cool.
I know you didn't.
The other product which does that is a Hi-Fi Rose, which is actually got a gorgeous display, absolutely gorgeous display, and you can have a really big VU meter.
Well, you could.
I did.
Yeah.
When I reviewed, that's the only setting I had it on.
Yeah.
And the lovely thing about the Hi-Fi Rose is you can change the colour of the VU meters as well. So you can have them sort of look modern and trendy, or classic and trendy.
I'm sure you experimented with that option for about 20 hours before listening to it.
Before I even plugged the speakers in. Yeah, absolutely.
So I think general thumbs up, and I think for me the interesting thing is they've kind of boiled down what made the 8000A really good in the 80s.
Yes.
And just kind of recreated it now 20, 30, 40 years later almost.
Yeah.
So it obviously it's got the DAC functionality, headphone out and all the rest of it, and the switchable modes. You can use it integrated, pre-power and power, which is really handy.
Really cool actually.
It works well. And the 4.3 inch OLED display, I thought, oh my god, that's terrible, but it kind of works really well, doesn't it?
It does. It makes it. It absolutely makes it, and it just makes it a little bit different to its competition as well. I did like that a lot. So.
I like the way it works with the navigation. You've got three knobs, haven't you, which you can select, and you don't have like millions of buttons and stuff. So.
No, and it's quite configurable.
Yeah.
You can do all sorts of different things with it. Change input levels and things like that. So.
Upsampling, switchable upsampling for the DAC. And
Yeah, we just put it on upsampling to max, didn't we? On when we listened to it, but no, it was good. Look, let's do a riffometer. What are you going to give the Audiolab out of 10?
I'm going to give it 8.
Yeah, I was thinking that. I was thinking it's a good solid 8. The DAC lets it down a little bit. If that's probably where the 2 points goes. But I think for £2,000, you really can't ask for much more than this. It's a great product.
I think as I said, I think the DACs at any of those amps at that price do the same. So it's not exactly a DCS Vivaldi that's fitted inside it.
Sure.
So and for most people at that market price, it'll work great. So
there we are.
A very solid 8.
Very solid 8 from
we
both
have to
of us.
agree, sadly.
Yes. No. All good. Excellent. Even with VU meters. My God.
Absolutely.
Brilliant.
Yeah.
Well, look. Thank you very much indeed for tuning in and watching this episode of Mike and Dave's Hi-Fi Riff, and we will look forward very much to seeing you at the next one. Thanks very much. Bye-bye.
Bye.
Bye.